Let's Get To presents
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros. We want Houston! We want Houston! Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veerling's back. This game is turned upside down.
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
Good morning. We're a whole series into the new season, and everybody's losing their damn minds because the Astros went 2-2. The season's basically over. Jeff Bagwell's ruining the club. Alex Bregman can't hit the ball. Jose Abreu's old and crippled and can't hit for extra bases. And we have no pitching, and Dusty Baker's dumb again. It must be Go Astros.
I'm glad I didn't cancel Netflix.
This is where we bring in Jim Nance to say a tradition like no other.
Right.
I'm Andy Tomchesson, your host today. With us, as always, is James Christopher, Brian Arbor, joining us from the wonderful Northeast Wilds of New Hampshire today. Gentlemen, I'll start with Brian, but what are your impressions of a 2-2 series against the fighting Laundry from Chicago?
You know, I enjoyed the wins and didn't like the losses. It's 4 games, so we have a good rule on this podcast not to look at the standings until Memorial Day. So not looking at them before tax day is an even better idea. So,
but Brian, the Rangers are undefeated, and the Phillies were supposed to have one of the best rotations in baseball, and they couldn't stop the Rangers.
I mean, I got my first notice from my friends that the Rangers were something at the 6th inning on Thursday. So text can just have just as hot a takes as Twitter and just as hot as Facebook.
Right.
I mean, who wouldn't have predicted coming out of the first weekend the Reds would be in first place, the Diamondbacks and Rockies would be tied for first place, Minnesota's in first place. I mean, it's Tampa Bay's and the Rangers. Jordan turned the game upside down, but literally the entire game.
The entire one.
Jim, you got to attend 2 of the games.
I did. My 2 takeaways were ring ceremonies are cool, and the guy playing center field for the White Sox is a thief, and I don't know what we got to do to get up to trade for him. Maybe that can solve the center field issue. The guy was all over the place. We all watched the games. I'm not remotely concerned because we are used to Bregman starting slow.
Yeah.
We knew going in that we would have some lack of firepower for a while Uncle Mike did take batting practice while I was there. That was cool. And Jordan's still hitting RBIs, and Abreu has a hit. I think he has a hit in all the games. So he did Buckner one ball, but other than that,
the games he's played.
Yeah. He's on pace for 162 hits.
I guess for me, it was an interesting weekend. And as Brian said, and as we say on this show, and Twitter evidently still doesn't get, they should listen to us and listen more. You can't take anything away from 4 baseball games unless they are 4 baseball games in October in the World Series or the playoffs, because these 4 baseball games are feeling out a roster, dealing with injuries, dealing with the White Sox had competent pitching this year, which is something they didn't have most of last year. Dylan Cease, I don't care what would have happened the rest of the weekend, Dylan Cease was not going to be hit on opening night. He was masterful, and you could watch that from every angle that ESPN was providing you, and he was incredible. I love
Dusty's explanation of that, though, too, that You know, because I've heard talk about this before, how you're not usually ready to hit a breaking ball in April, and he just had his breaking ball moving everywhere.
It is an interesting thing because this is one of those baseball axioms is that it always feels like it's dependent on results, but pitching's ahead of hitting when you come out of the spring. Well, why is that? And if you know it, and it's been going on for 150 years,
Why can't you?
how about you do something different?
Yeah.
Brian, was there anything that we need to be concerned about coming out of this weekend? And the answer is no, but
Yeah. I mean, you highlighted the biggest thing, Andy, which is that they're down 2 starters and their lineup lacked punch yesterday when they had 3 starters out because, hey, they're going to give rest to their players because, again, one game in April is not so critical that you have to do that. And the pitching wasn't as sharp as we hoped it would be. But again, I think that's all, it's 4 games. They won 2 of them. It's too early in baseball. And if this series happened in the end of July, we wouldn't notice it, that Alex Bregman had a bad weekend.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So baseball, there's a reason they play 162. There's a reason they play every day is because one baseball game is a lousy way to determine who's better. 162 still isn't perfect, but as close as we're going to get. And over the long run, this is a really good baseball team and will continue to be.
I think one of the things to Brian's point too, Andy, is that the same group of people who are like, oh, Jose going to be back in May, we're going to be fine, are also freaking out about this weekend. Like if we can admit that 2 weeks, as long as we're hovering in the race, or 2 months, excuse me, and then we get Altuve back and we're going to be fine, then why are we panicking about 2-2 in the first 4 games of the season? Don't know.
Well, I mean, and we could be the Mariners because if we're going to base our whole future on 4 games, they're 1-3, and they weren't exactly playing world beaters this weekend. The White Sox are, conceivably at least a playoff eligible team. I don't know that Seattle had to face that level of competition, and they're behind Oakland in the standings. If I want to panic, I'm going to look at the standings on April 3rd and go, my God. But finally, Trout and Ohtani have fulfilled their potential, and they're 2-1, second place.
I'd like to add one positive element of overreaction. Apparently, Chas McCormick's going to lead the majors in steals this season, which I did not have him at bingo card, so that's exciting.
I like that too. Well, he's not, because we're going to trade for the guy from Chicago.
So I think that's another thing I wanted to, since you brought up Chas, he appears, regardless of who he's facing, and I know Brian and you and I had a little minor debate on this. I don't necessarily agree with the reasoning, but I think we're seeing that Chas McCormick is in a platoon with Jake Myers in center field. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that seems to be what's going on early season. I don't understand, and I don't like playing the game of second guessing the manager, but I don't understand what the basis of that is, other than Chas McCormick hits left-handed pitching much better than he hits right-handed pitching. Having said that, Jake Myers doesn't seem to be able to hit anybody. So is there anything that we should be looking for? And I'll take that from either of you, because I am scratching my head about why Jake Myers has a place on this roster right now.
Brian, you want to go first?
Yeah, Jake Myers is supposed to be the best defensive center fielder on the team, and he had really good defensive numbers. Last year, he didn't have a good series defensively. Again, he played 2 games. Actually, the curious thing is Chas McCormick played 2 games. Jake Myers played 2 games. Corey Julks played 3, and that was curious. And I don't have a measure which tells me that Julks is better, but maybe they're relying heavily on spring training. I don't know. But it's something to monitor, how they sort of shake the outfield out, because there's no clear one guy where they feel like this is the guy, this is the starter, and we'll play off of him. And then, others will come in to spell him every once in a while. So I don't think what we expected with Chas. I think we expected Chas to be the starter full stop throughout the offseason, and that he isn't on opening day is odd.
I'll tell you what's odd. Well, first of all, Julks definitely misplayed a ball in left field that I think did change the impact, again, of a game in April. So
yeah.
I do find it interesting because Dusty kind of portrays himself as a gut manager. And all we've seen over the last 2 years is that Chas rises to the occasion. Chas is a gamer. He's the guy that maybe doesn't practice very well, maybe doesn't whatever, but I mean, what does he have to do? Make a game-saving catch in the World Series? Oh wait, he did that. So I don't understand it either. It seems like if you're gonna it seems like Chaz gets 2/3 of the starts in center field, and you bring Myers along to see if what you think you have in him was what you have in him. I would argue he's not been right since his shoulder.
Yeah, and I think that's the frustrating thing. He showed promise. I know Darren Ernstad was very high on him for whatever that's worth. And that turned into a good AAA season. What was that, 3 years ago now?
Uh-huh.
Or 3 seasons ago now? And out of nowhere, because he was not a highly thought of prospect and he was a little bit old for AAA, but did really well, got a call up and did well in Houston, and then hurt his shoulder, I guess, against these same White Sox. If I recall right, and just hasn't been the same since. So I think it's interesting to watch. I also think we're shuffling deck chairs until Brantley comes back in the outfield a little bit.
That's definitely true. I will note Myers had really good numbers when he went down to AAA last year. So
he did.
That's a reason for hope. He had better numbers than Corey Julks. Again, does that mean anything the next year? We'll see. And obviously, there's more than just numbers from previous seasons that determine these things. They're looking at a lot more information than we have access to.
Shifting gears a little bit, this was the first weekend of real games with the new rule set, and Major League Baseball, maybe for the first time in a while, that at least that I can remember, decided to market an aspect of their game to people watching their game. So you had a slew of commercials in game about the rule changes, including guys like Daniel Vogelbach. I mean, luminaries like Daniel Vogelbach.
Is he
Joey
still fat?
Votto, Nestor Cortez, so at least an actual player who's going to play, all the way up to Tim Anderson and then Walter White. Now, I don't know if I need Malcolm in the Middle's dad to tell me that baseball is the best game that's ever been invented, but he's being paid by Major League Baseball to say it. So I'm encouraged, I guess, a little bit. I want your guys' take it. I'll start with Jim. I'm encouraged a little bit that baseball seems to acknowledge that something has changed and we need to talk about it, because that hasn't really been.
Yeah.
But I'm curious as to what they were trying to get at, telling me that Daniel Vogelbach wants to steal bases now because they're bigger.
What I find interesting about a couple of things, and I noticed a lot of it in the first game because we watched the first game on TV, obviously. And first of all, Carl Weathers should be doing more voiceover work, full stop. Why he doesn't do more, I don't understand. Kudos for Major League Baseball for figuring that part out.
I think he's still collecting money from Buster Bluth.
Yeah,
so
because you got a soup going, baby. But I didn't mind. How do I put this? I agree. I think they did a really good job of painting the picture of the new rules. What I didn't necessarily like is a member of the rules committee being on the broadcast and somebody asking him, hey, what are you going to say to fans who complain about the game being too short while they're there? And he said, well, no one's complained to us about that yet. And all I know is at the game, it's literally all I heard, because again, we're sitting in that club. And so you want to pace things out. You want to enjoy yourself, and you look up. I was supposed to go meet a friend of our show, and we had meant to meet at the third. And before I realized it was almost the fourth, because it was flying by that quickly. I'll live with it. I'll learn to adapt with it. I think the new rules are fine. I still don't like the limited number of pickoff rules, because I think that literally changes the strategy of the game. But yeah, I think I'm not as impressed with the messaging as you might be, Andy. I think some of it's been still very mixed and still very much a propaganda.
But Walter White.
I am the one who
Walter White tried to sell us.
I am the one who hits.
Same guy, yeah, Brian.
Yeah, okay. That yeah.
It might have been Heisenberg. I don't know.
So, some of the ads were really good. Say what you will about the Vogelbach being a star. There was the best ad as far as entertainment value of what they had in those ads. I'm skeptical, particularly about the shift band, which I find is, people figured out a better way to play baseball after 150 years of playing baseball. It's hard to do that.
Yeah.
But they did that, and they decided we're going to punish people for that. And the upside is if people try to get around this, we will put in additional rules to keep teams from innovating, to try to get more batters out. So that's the one I'm most skeptical about. That's the one I saw the least stuff about, for an obvious reason that it's hardest thing to sell, that you're going to see more ground ball singles is not sort of good. In general, I'm fine with the pitch clock, or apparently it's a pitch timer for some reason that Major League Baseball wants to call it that rather than what everyone calls it, because I don't know.
Because reasons.
Yeah. In general, I'm a fan of the modern game. I have, I don't have this great affection for, again, 2 hoppers through the hole.
Mm-hmm.
I have more affection for home runs and strikeouts, so I've been less bothered by how the game has been changing than other people, including the Major League Baseball Rules Committee, including owners who are distressed that they have to pay for analytics, and got a sympathetic ear from Rob Manfred, who said, yeah, it's just a race to nowhere, which is A, not true, and B, no one says that about any other aspect of trying to get better at the game. So I felt sort of personally attacked by that. But, in general, I am holding off opinion until we see how this plays out for a while. It is weird to see the pitch timer violations, the umpires going to their watch. So I'm working on getting used to that, but I think there are clear benefits to that one, and I'm more positive about that rule change, even if it does change the rhythm of the game.
I think to Brian's point too, I think particularly in the shift, it was a way to figure out things using being smart, and I don't think we should discourage that. But I also feel like the Astros were also developing the one kind of offense that could consistently beat that defense, and I think that's ultimately where it comes down to. Yeah. Is that the big teams that wanted to pay big home run hitters weren't being successful because the shift was killing them. And I think that's why we see the change.
Well, I mean, we saw it with the Yankees right fielder last year up until the trade deadline. Joey Gallo openly complained that he couldn't hit doubles because people weren't playing him straight up. And I think, no less than Fred Lynn said they shifted on Ted Williams too, and he hit 406 that year.
Yeah.
Then they stopped doing it. It's catering to a subset of the players and owners that I don't know have the best interest of the game in their minds. But to Brian's point, I don't know that we can really evaluate what's happening until we've had more than 4 games being played.
More than 4 games, yeah.
It's going to take probably a season, maybe a season and a half, to really evaluate how quick the games got, what the impact is. I was told going to your watch on the field was illegal in 2017, and now the umpires are doing it all over the place. So that's setting a bad example. Unless, of course, you play for Boston, and it was just one guy behind a scoreboard calling out things he shouldn't have called out.
Yeah,
who works for the Dodgers now, which is a whole separate conversation.
It was nice to see Joe Kelly get his, though.
That was, if you're an Astros fan, that there's a little bit of a mixed bag this weekend, because Joe Kelly took a loss and Mike Clevenger got a win.
Yeah, I know.
So if you are pro spousal abuse and abandoning your kids, good for you, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because your hero won a game. Speaking of new positions, and not that I want to segue directly into Jeff Bagwell for Mike Clevenger, but Jeff Bagwell, through all his efforts in the offseason and to much chagrin on Twitter, has been named the club's senior advisor to ownership and baseball operations. And when I guess McTaggart announced this or wrote about it over the weekend, it really kind of exploded after the game yesterday. And on top of all the angst Twitter was feeling about the general malaise that happened in Minute Maid Park on Sunday, I don't know that it was well received. And there's certainly 2 camps about it. I wanted to start with Brian on this. What is Bagwell's role, and what does this mean to you, I guess?
I think it's easier to answer the second question. It means what we've known since at least last summer, but it's been clear for longer than that, which is Jeff Bagwell. What Jeff Bagwell says, Jim Crane listens to. And this puts more sort of formal, puts in a more formal position where that's clearer. And it was most, again, known for a while, but most clear by the people, Jeff, that Dana Brown spoke to beyond Jim Crane and getting hired as general manager were Jeff Bagwell and Reggie Jackson. I am not in favor of Jeff Bagwell having an important role in influencing the owners' baseball decisions, because I look across baseball and I see very few players, people whose qualifications are they could play the game well a while ago, making important baseball decisions. That's a model that's fallen out of favor for at least a quarter century now, if not longer. And so I'm pessimistic that it will work well. To argue against myself, I was very much in favor of what happened this offseason. So that's an argument that my fears are overstated. And I hope you guys keep reminding me that my fears were overstated, because the facts tell otherwise.
Well, and I think it's a lot like the rule changes, maybe, that we have to see what we're going to see before we know it's bad or good. Jim, where are you on this?
Well, my most important position, I think, is I'm still very much in a wait and see. And I honestly think we might not know the full realization of this decision for 3 or 4 years, right? Like, I think the major league club is for the most part set, outside of plugging in holes. Now, what he says he wants the Astros to continue to be is what I think we all want it to be: a team that pitches well, plays good defense, and doesn't strike out. I think the other thing too is, I don't know, because Andy, you had sort of hinted at this over the winter, that like Biggio had always kind of had a role when Luhnow was here, but I don't know that Luhnow's ego would have allowed for anybody to think anybody other than Luhnow was making decisions. So we don't really know.
Sure. I would argue that if Luhnow was listening to Craig Biggio, it would never be something that would be brought to the surface.
Right. I also am always going to be in favor of a blended thing. And I use an example, and like, I don't want to offend anybody on the show. I'm going to use a history teacher that teaches here at St. Michael's, and he teaches about World War II, and he's very interested, and he knows all the data, all the analytics, if you will. Who do you think understands war better, me or him? Can we answer the question on the show? Probably me, right?
It depends on what we're asking.
I've been in a war, so I understand how war works better than someone theoretically who reads about it.
And you know how to use your weapon better. You know how to do individual maneuvers better. You know how to work with other people within your unit better. Do you have a better picture of the whole strategy?
No, but that's why the modern military, first of all, promotes usually the Department of Defense officials and things like that, former soldiers. Mm-hmm. You have to, I believe a blended approach is important, because some of the things you just mentioned, do you work with people better? I think Bagwell maybe can identify who would be a better clubhouse guy than not a clubhouse guy. I don't think we're going back to old school baseball, and I think we got to quit the knee-jerk thing. And I think that there is a tendency for people who lean more analytic to sort of almost be nervous about the fact that the meatheads are coming back and taking something that they have earned a stake in. And I say earned because obviously the approach of analytics has won 2 World Series for us. I think, one, there's no reason to be panicked about any of it yet until there's evidence to be panicked about. I don't think the Astros are going. I think Jim Crane likes money, and winning makes money. So I don't think he's going to take too far away from what does that. But I just think that there is this natural idea that having played the game offers you zero insight into how a team should be built. And I think that I honestly feel like we'd feel a lot better if this was Biggio, not Bagwell. I really do, because I just look at Bagwell as, I look at him as a knuckle dragger. So for me, I have to get over my own sort of opinion about Jeff Bagwell. But I think if this were somebody else, we would have a different opinion. That's my thing. And I using the military example is not fair, because I think it's hard for people to want to challenge that, because you don't want to look like you're insulting me, which I don't think you would do. But I think that's the only comparison I could have is we've seen 2 wars fought in the last 100 years, one of which was fought by people other than military people, and that was largely the Vietnam War, and then we saw World War II. So I think you could make the argument. I don't know. That's just my argument is I think you still need to be blended. And I think having someone who's played the game, helping someone who's never played it, and Jim Crane is not a bad thing. Particularly Jeff Bagwell's one thing, but Reggie Jackson's a whole other, I think.
I'll just say this here about you are right. We don't know how this is going to go. I'm more nervous in general about front office decisions because it is harder to reverse front office decisions and decision making. So this is a decision which is going to affect how the team will make decisions in this offseason and this trade deadline and for the next several years.
Yeah,
So
and like I was saying, we're not gonna know if it didn't work for 3 years, and then we're gonna be 3 years down the road. I mean, I definitely understand the concern.
Yeah. So will it work out again? The evidence from this offseason was it was a pretty well executed offseason. You know, the best evidence of that is Yuli Gurriel is on the Marlins right now. No, I'm serious. Like they didn't make a.
Oh, you're right.
The evidence last year is that Yuli Gurriel is at the end of his playing days, and Father Time is a bastard. Father Time is undefeated and a bastard. And the type of move that owners and hey, we're going to give the utility job to David Hensley, who has 100 major league plate appearances, and was a 26th round draft pick, and we haven't heard about. Is an encouraging move because I think he'll be a better player this year than Yuli Gurriel.
Yeah.
Type of move that owners and old baseball players make is for old famous baseball players. So again,
although to argue for Brian's point, I don't like the fact that we're still arguing about a center fielder for the second season in a row. I don't love that.
But we don't have any evidence that Jeff Bagwell or Reggie Jackson or anybody outside of Dana Brown's front office has made any personnel decisions. We know that Bagwell went to Miami to talk to Jose Abreu prior to signing. We don't know that Jeff Bagwell said, go sign Jose Abreu. So it's kind of, we won't know. I think the unfortunate thing for Bagwell is he's not a well-spoken person, which we all cast our own aspersions on. George W. Bush, whatever you think about him, as the dumbest president ever. Well, maybe not now, but the dumbest president ever because he wasn't well spoken, not because of any other particular reasons. We value somebody who's well spoken. To your point, Jim, if it was Craig Biggio, he talked better on the front of the microphone, so he sounded like a better person. I can't get worked up about
Biggio also probably wouldn't have said anything about specifics to his role. That's probably would have been
it would have been a lot about, well, it's a team game and there's a lot of guys in the front office and there's a lot of people who make decisions. And we don't know what Bagwell is exactly advising on. We know what he has opinions on. Mm-hmm. We don't know how much Crane values it outside of the PR of having Jeff Bagwell on there, because there are members of the fan base who do value the fact that there's a Hall of Famer willing to hang around and sit behind home plate and wave his cap around every now and then. So I guess it's kind of, to Brian's point, we'll see. I just hate for Bagwell that he is, for a portion of the fan base, the boogeyman, because I don't know that he's done anything to deserve being the boogeyman at this point.
I think part of it too is part of why I get fired up about this argument is I think there feels like a pushing of the goalposts on it, where I think we can all acknowledge that all three of us would have flipped our lid if Brad Ausmus had been named general manager, right?
Sure.
And there was a lot of people that thought that's where we were going, and people were even naming Dana Brown as the better alternative. And then Dana Brown got the job, and that wasn't a good enough hire for some people. For those same people who were advocating for Dana Brown before, well, that's still not good enough, because and those same people were sort of undercutting all of Dana Brown's accomplishments. And so it's almost like I can't help but internalize this fight against people that I think are not being logical. They just want to be loud and stupid for loud and stupid sakes. They're not like Brian and I can have a disagreement, but we're both, I think, coming from a fundamental belief system that really hasn't changed very much. So I don't know. It's just, to me, it's frustrating because yeah, I would have had a real hard time if Bagwell had been named GM or if Brad Ausmus had been named GM. I would not have been into that.
I'd also like to point out to a point that, Jim, you made, that when somebody besides the U.S. military has been in charge of wars, they stretch the Korean War to 11 seasons. And that's just untoward. And a movie and 2 spinoffs. So
Aftermath was underrated, guys.
Trapper John MD.
Literally true. It was underrated, not rated well.
The last thing that I wanted to touch on real quickly, we do have another member of the front office in a senior advisor role. His name is Reggie Jackson. You may have heard of him if you follow baseball. Reggie had a documentary released on Prime Video, I believe, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I finally got to sit down and watch that, and I think I encouraged both of you. I don't know if you both got a chance to
I
see
did.
it. One of the things that's interesting to me is from the very beginning that Reggie is wearing Astros hats through the first 15, 20 minutes of the documentary while talking about his life growing up and as an Oakland A. And then the last 15 minutes of the documentary was especially relevant to me as an Astros fan. I think the documentary overall is great as a baseball fan.
Absolutely.
There are incredible amounts of history and perspective that I think are given from a lot of different players about not only the player Reggie was, but the phenomenon he became once he arrived in New York and all of the drama around that. But what I found interesting is the reason given in the documentary about why he doesn't work for the Yankees anymore and why he lives and works in Houston. And Jim, you probably saw it more recently than I did. So what was your take on that reasoning?
Well, it was funny to watch. It was funny to watch all of it in the context of also we're really close to some Yankee fans of ours, and it almost echoes what their concerns have been. And essentially, Reggie Jackson wants to make a difference both on the field and off the field, in particular for players of color, for Black players. And we've talked about that on the show. We're losing that demographic. It was interesting where the same bit made me incredibly proud to be an Astros fan, while if I were a Yankee fan, I would have been embarrassed. And basically, it shows Reggie Jackson having a conversation with Hal Steinbrenner, and you can just tell Hal Steinbrenner is giving him these very rote, the answers he wants to hear with zero emotion about it. And you expect Reggie to walk out going, hey, okay, he told me what I wanted to hear, but instead he's like, I can't believe that dude. And he almost immediately quit. And then he goes to Houston and they're setting up all of these things. I think it speaks to baseball at its best needs to be a community partner. And I think it speaks to the fact that the Astros at least seem interested in that and the Yankees do not. And I also think you can make an argument for the Yankees not being terribly interested in any degree of racial diversity or diversity of thought in their front office. So I don't know if that's what you were getting at by the question, Andy, but those were the two things that I kind of took away from this segment.
Well, I think that was my takeaway as well, is that the Yankees were playing lip service to Reggie's concerns. And Reggie Jackson had been an employee of the Yankees outside of playing for, I think, the past 15 years, if I remember right. But it was certainly a long period of time to test the theory. And where he found common ground with Jim Crane, who plays Darth Vader in this show, is that Crane heard his concerns and gave him the freedom and a budget to go do something about it.
Yeah.
So revamping the Astros minority outreach program, which they have had for a number of years prior to Reggie showing up, but letting him be in charge of that, it makes Dana Brown is fully qualified for the job. So what I'm about to say is not a swipe at his qualifications, but it makes sense that Dana Brown got more consideration than maybe he would have in other front offices because Reggie Jackson was in Jim Crane's ear talking about minority opportunities.
I think the two of the biggest, and I know you and I are, Andy, going to do a full review of this for Let's Get To, or you've just been told that anyway. But one of the two big things that I think were really heartbreaking was listening to Hank Aaron talk about how, I have an office for the Braves, but it's just so the Braves can say I have an office. No job, no role, nothing. And then I think when if I remember correctly, the way it's shot, when Reggie gives up on the Yankees, he's literally in the Yankee tunnel immediately after the interview with Hal Steinbrenner. At least that's the way it's edited to be. Where he walked out, this guy, no, I'm gone.
For me, it made me proud of what the Astros organization is at least trying to be. I'm not going to say they're 100% successful. Certainly, the demographic of African-American players has shrunk to virtually nothing. And there's got to be really concentrated efforts to get those players, that youth back interested in the game and bringing families back to the game and all of that. And, I think it's bigger than just Reggie Jackson or Jim Crane. At some point, you have to have affordable tickets for families to come back of any color.
Right.
It can't just be corporate ticket buyers. You're going to have to deal with the blackouts. But I think at least from an organizational standpoint on the micro level, the Astros have their hearts in the right place and they're actually putting some money behind it. So that was my takeaway. Brian, did you get to watch this at all?
I have not because I've been traveling, but one sort of broader thought here that's sort of interesting. Jim Crane, before he was Astros owner, had been sued and gotten settlements over racial discrimination at some of the companies that he was involved with. And what I'm sort of intrigued by, sort of global story, is, has Jim Crane changed? Is Jim Crane, hey, just people have changed and I need to change with them? Is this, I just didn't do a good job of PR before and I want PR now, and boy, this is a way to really do that and do that well. I'm not, there's real sort of efforts here, so I don't sort of disparage that. So in some ways this is a story about Reggie Jackson. I'm intrigued about the broader story of Jim Crane here.
Yeah, and I don't think any of us know the answer to the question that you just asked.
And what I'm saying is, like, that would be he won't sit down for an interview on this, I'm guessing, but it'd be something that would be really great to sort of think about a feature of Jim Crane, about how if he has changed, or, what's changed about him over his decade of owning the Astros, but also his many years of being a business leader.
I mean, Houston loves Jim McIngvale too, and the reason he started doing advertising the way he does it is because he was sued because he owned a property where a lion mauled a kid. Nobody talks about that, but he was given like 5 million hours of community service, and that turned into marketing events. So, maybe the cart drags the horse a little bit here, but I think the end result seems to be a positive right now, at least the way it's being portrayed. And I don't get the feeling from watching the documentary that Reggie Jackson is one to suffer fools gladly. I think that's been kind of true of his entire career. So I think he has, somewhat of an instinct about whether or not he's being snowed, but I guess time will tell. But it's a good watch if you're an Astros fan and if you're a baseball fan in general. So that's about it for what we had today. Any parting shots, gentlemen?
No, but I want to show everybody my crotch.
Great.
Yeah, baby.
If
Go Astros.
If you saw the 117 on there, I know what that number is supposed to be, but I liked my answer better. That 117 is the number of World Series that actually mattered because 2020 didn't count.
I love it. I love it.
All right. I guess we're at an end. We're 2-2. We open up a series against the hapless Tigers, who I think are somehow worse than the Astros because they haven't even won a game. What is AJ Hinch doing? So for Go Astros, I'm Andy. That's James. That's Brian. Have a wonderful weekend. Beat the hell out of the Tigers.
Go Astros.
Go Astros.